Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
John Ball, welcome to Speakers Who Get Results.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Well, we're so glad to have you here. And it's just really fun to be talking to somebody who is a fellow speaker trainer and who's also someone who lives an international life. It's just a good thing. So I'm very happy to be part of this. And I wanted to ask you, question I ask all my guests is, who would be your dream interview? If you could interview somebody who is no longer with us, someone from history, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who ought to be in the audience?
There's quite a long list for this, but I mean, my ultimate preference, so if I had to choose, like, who do I think was the greatest person of all time who I would like to hang out with, would be Leonardo da Vinci. It's my top choice, the Renaissance man, probably one of the greatest minds that ever lived. And wow. I would want to get so many insights in so many different ways. I think I would be feeling very inadequate whilst I was there as well, but it would be a great conversation to have. And the people who would be listening, well, really anyone who wants to get inside the mind of a genius, at least to some level, and get some insights into his methods and processes of thinking and inspiration and those kinds of things.
Yes, I think if I were there, I would have studied a whole lot to come up with a list of the right kinds of questions and just see what he was like. Yeah.
You know what? I'm no expert on Leonardo da Vinci. I know a little, but I would definitely be boning up on my Leonardo da Vinci information for that interview. Yeah.
Yes. I often think that when I ask this question, I think, some of these people would have been really surprised to see that their name had survived, and others would have said, well, yes, of course I'm immortal. So which one do you think Da Vinci would be?
I don't know that he'd be too surprised, but I do think he might be a little surprised that he is still regarded as one of the greatest minds who ever lived. So he might have hoped that there would be much greater minds before. And certainly since there have been lots of amazing and intelligent, genius people in many different fields, but in terms of the amount of areas in which he was successful and masterful, very few have come close to that level of genius.
That's I think I've worked with one or two in my life and looked at them and said, all right, this one really is a genius. I better pay attention. So and indeed there are still geniuses around. Fortunately for us, thank you.
Yeah, I don't include myself, but yes.
Yes, right. No, I'm humbly sitting at the feet of many, many. John, you said an interesting thing the other day when you talked about your former career in aviation and that you left, you got excited about coaching, and you decided in 2009, you said, okay, I'm going to be a coach. And you failed spectacularly.
Yeah.
And then you tried it again and succeeded.
Right.
So I need to hear this story. How did you, what were the mistakes you made, and what advice could you give to other people?
Oh my, the mistakes were many. One of them was starting a business just as Recession hit in the UK, which was a really bad time to try and start. I started off doing business coaching, and I couldn't get any traction at all. I got a couple of clients and it just wasn't getting off the ground. And other things were mistakes that really, looking back, could have been corrected and could have been seen had I taken a bit of an external view on the things that I was doing, but I was caught up in them. So some of the people who I chose to align myself with, for example, may not have been the best people for me, where I ended up feeling like I was doing all the work and I didn't know how to get the results. A lot of it was just lack of knowledge and experience in having my own business, having always worked for other people, worked in companies and corporate environments.
So do you teach about this now? I'm asking because actually yesterday I was on a conference call and they asked me, it was a bunch of corporate people who are mostly corporate employees. And they said, okay, Elizabeth, you've been on your own for a while. What are you going to say to somebody in the middle of a recession who's lost their job or knows they're going to be losing their job and is thinking about going out on their own? So I'd be curious to hear what your answer to that is.
Now, I don't think there's a bad time. I think the right time is always now. But if you don't know what you're doing, you'd better find out pretty darn quick what you need to do and how you need to be doing it. And that's one of the things where maybe I fell down, is just not asking for help from people who could have helped me, not letting people know that I was struggling when I didn't know what to do, thinking that I was supposed to know what I was doing because other people seemed a lot more competent than I was. But realistically, even looking back to that time, there were opportunities. People were still making money. I just didn't know what they were or how to get them. And so I was hoping, I guess, that luck would fill in the gaps, and that just being there, like the build it and they will come kind of mentality, I thought just being there would be enough, and it wasn't.
That's really interesting because, first of all, I thought I was the only one who thought she had to know everything when she started and that had to learn the hard way to ask for help.
Right.
Interesting because there are so many coaches out there, and nowadays we're recording this in the middle of the COVID-19 shutdown. So I don't know when people will be listening to this, but we're in the middle of a global shutdown and facing a global recession. There are a lot of people out there saying, follow me, give me your last $2,000, $5,000, $10,000, and I will make you a huge success. You'll be just as famous as Tony Robbins. How do you sort out who's telling the truth? Or actually, who's the right person for you?
Okay. There's quite a few things there. And I've been in the personal and professional development industry. I mean, I've 10 years full time, but over 15 years I've been around the industry and working in it part time. So I know a lot of people, and I've met a lot of shady characters, and I've met a lot of amazing people as well. And I've certainly made mistakes. I have invested some of my education money with people who really, I would have been better off finding someone who really knew what they were talking about. They sounded like they knew what they were doing. They talked a really good game, and I fell for sales techniques that people have been using for a long time that get you all emotional and excited for the sale, but you end up making a not so clever decision, and then you think, well, I'll try and make the most of it and maybe it'll work out all right. And looking back, okay, I've made some mistakes, but I have also invested a lot of education money with people who are fantastic and have really led the way for me, and I've learned amazing things from as well. I learned amazing things from the other people too, but not things I really wanted to learn, I guess.
Well, I think we do have to, we do have to stumble a few times. Certainly, you and I train presenters, so there are the ones who can really back it up and the ones who can't. Do you have a couple of just key pieces of advice for people who are trying to decide?
I do, and it's advice that I give to my clients in terms of when I encourage my own coaching clients to invest in their education, not just with me, with anybody, and that you should do a bit of diligence, do a bit of homework on the person that you're looking to learn from. You need to at least know and see that they can deliver on the goods. Like if they're telling you that they can present, you should be able to see that. If they know the tools of presentation, you should be able to see that. And they should actually be doing the thing that they're talking about doing as well. So
well, I think I should say, you'd have to look besides their own material. You're not going to read their ads and their, get some outside evaluations too.
Yeah. Well,
Because
you know
they're,
what?
of course, going to say they do it. Yeah.
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great place for that, really, because referrals and things on LinkedIn have to come from people. Have to be in the site. You can't just enter your own referrals, recommendations from other people in LinkedIn. So, although you could pay someone to do it, which would be horrible, but the referrals that people get, yeah, I'm sure they do. But I'm sure for the most part, a lot of it is genuine, and most people are genuine. So, it's probably not a bad idea to look at someone's profile. And I always say, don't make the decision right then and there at a live event or a live webinar, wherever it is you're at. Take the time to go and think about it. And if they won't let you, or they say, well, they won't get this price or whatever, that's okay. That's a scarcity model that people put in to try and press you into making the purchase right then and there. Better to make a solid purchase and pay a bit more than to make a cheaper purchase and regret it later.
That's very interesting advice. And of course, as presenters who are trying to move someone to take action, we're using sales techniques too. I mean, buying decisions are emotional. We know that. It is part of the deal. You talk about influence and persuasion and why you care about teaching them. I think we should also we seem to have strayed into also the ethical realm. And why use tools of influence and persuasion at all if they have been misused so much?
I think we all use them, and you can't really have a proper conversation about these tools without touching on the ethics of them as well. And the reality is the tools themselves have no ethics. Like a hammer has no right or wrong within it. It's a tool. And the tools of influence and persuasion also have no inherent morality within them, only that of the intention of the person using them. So I like to teach it with within an ethical framework. However, I can't anymore guarantee that the people learning are going to use that ethical framework and apply it in their own lives. What I will say is, when I first learned about this and uncovered this world of hidden influence, it was like a veil being lifted off my eyes, and I saw all these ways that I had been influenced in the past without realizing it. Whether you know about them or not, they exist, and we use some of them anyway without maybe even realizing that we're using them. But when you know what they are, certainly you can use them ethically or otherwise, but you can also be aware when other people are using them and make a clearer decision. You'll know when somebody is trying to use some persuasion techniques on you if you've learned them already. So I think that's one of the reasons why I think it's important for people to know these things, because every day we are being influenced and persuaded, and not always in ways that are for our own good, for the greater benefit. And that is, maybe you asked about what sort of questions you should be asking yourself when someone's trying to sell you a course. It shouldn't be a difficult decision, and it shouldn't be just something you only make based on the emotion of it. It should be a bit of a no-brainer, really. Like, you want to work with this person, you want what they're offering, and maybe they're even giving you the assurances then and there that say, this is a safe decision to make, and I feel comfortable and confident going forward with this. But if you go to one of these like one-day or weekend sales events, which I guess would be online at the moment at least, you're going to have someone on the stage who's talking a great game and will tell you all these amazing things, and they're not afraid to sound like they know every successful person in their industry and that they are standing shoulder to shoulder with them, when in fact that may not be the case at all. But they've learned these amazing sales techniques and they've been practicing them, and they've convinced people that they should come and buy with them. That's why I think people need to understand how these things work, so that you can protect yourself against the scam artists. It's not going to be everyone who gets to have that level of protection, but it would be wonderful for more and more people to understand how that works and to be able to stop themselves being negatively persuaded.
It's also really interesting and useful to learn about different styles and different people who respond to different things. I do truly believe that there's room for everybody. And if you've got something to say, then it is your right and your privilege to say it. But it's also, if you've got something important to say or teach, it's your responsibility to offer it. And who you are, your energy is the sort of thing that's going to make people react. So I often think about my other half responds to very different energy. And I got dragged to conference after conference after conference going, not for me, not for me, until I fell into some people who were speaking my language, my emotional language. And I went, oh, this is the one that's going to work for me. These are the people I'm going to work with. I don't like those other people. I don't fall for that style. I fall for this style. And so, and then once I learned that, I realized, oh, I can use that. I have a friend who's actually been on your podcast. It's a friend of ours who is very out there, and she wants new, and she wants disruptors, and she works with people who are fast and out there. And I'm a little bit more deliberate. So we joke that I will send her the people who are bored by my pace, and she'll send me the people who are scared of her. Right. And we do send people back and forth to say, I think you'd be better off. You'd be better off with this other person.
Yeah.
So
different energies work in different ways.
When you teach influence and persuasion, it's a huge topic.
Yeah, it is.
Where do you start? Give us a couple of, what's the first technique or tool that you teach?
One of the first things that I will teach clients, especially as what I'm doing is in relation to presentation, is that a lot of the influence and persuasion comes from how you show up. We're just talking about energy, right? So your energy is really important. And if you're robotic or you're stiff or you're unemotional, nothing's really going to be getting transmitted. And people are really, when they're not looking for connection, it's one of the things that will probably never be replaced. I hope will never be replaced by computers, although I can't say for sure. But connection and empathy, that real human to human thing that we do like and appreciate. And if that's not coming across, people are going to switch off very quickly. So your own energetic state, and I don't mean that in any sort of woo-woo way, I mean that really in terms of the emotional level that you're in. If you want your audience to be engaged, you have to have that feeling of engagement yourself, and you have to be inspiring that. So you have to work up your own energy level. And so you're not going to have any influence or sway with people if they're just shutting down before you've even really got going. You have to have some energy in your voice. You have to have a bit of emotional energy that's coming across and being conveyed, especially when you're on camera. It has to be maybe a little bit higher than in person. So on the stage, it can be a bit different. You still want great energy on the stage, but you probably have to do things a little bit differently on camera, really. I say probably, you definitely have to do things a bit differently. If you're running group coaching, or you're running webinars, or you're doing an online presentation, you need to have your energy just above how you would normally be for yourself. Otherwise, you might just come across as a little bit boring.
Yeah, that's a very good point. So talking about boring, is there a cure for a dull presentation?
Definitely. And any presentation can be improved. And you have to look at, well, what are the factors that make a presentation dull? One is delivery, which we were just talking about a little bit. And you would also bring in that thing you'll always hear in Toastmasters groups about vocal variety. So if someone's talking pretty much at the same level, that's going to get pretty boring pretty quickly as well. If they're too quiet and you can't really hear them, or they're too loud and it's making your head explode, these are all things that are going to shut you down from a presentation. So you do need to consider the audience and consider how you want to be perceived, and get some checks as to how you are being perceived. But the content is really important as well. I know one person, I'm not going to say any names, I don't think anyone else outside of my club would know her anyway, but one person I know, she's a great presenter. She delivers amazing presentations, but they don't make any sense. And so you get to the end of it, and you're like, what was that even about? And we have no idea. But in terms of the actual skills of delivery and staging and eye contact, all the things that we train people to be really good at, she's fantastic. But the content level and the message and what people take away afterwards is completely missing. And so it's been interesting. She's probably the only person I've ever seen as a speaker. I think she's an amazing speaker, but I would never want her to speak at an event because it never makes sense. Everyone comes away more confused. And yet most people are at the other side of that, where the nerves are getting the better of them and they're talking at people rather than talking to them, and all these kinds of things that do make a presentation boring. And probably one of the biggest ones for me is trying to put too much information in as well, and trying to fit too much into such a short space of time, which is one of the best things that for me, from my experience with the Toastmasters organization, of most of the presentations you'll do in a club like that are 5 to 7 minutes. You have to edit down what you want to say to pretty much the essentials.
Yes, it's very good discipline. Here's a question for you. Now, you're an Englishman living in Spain. I'm an American. Right now, today, I'm in America, but I live part-time in Austria. So we both deal with people who are, we're dealing with multiple languages. So I'm curious, you're in a couple of international business groups, and you're in a Toastmasters group in Spain. Is that where you're, is that a local group that you?
It is in Valencia, yeah. Where I live.
In Valencia. How does translation, how do you deal with speaking in a different language, not your native language, or to speaking your native language to people for whom it's their second language?
Right. And for me and my club, I attend a club that is in English. Although they do have meetings in Spanish, they're not at a time that I can go to them, unfortunately. So I only get to go to the English club meetings for that. And my business networking stuff here as well is pretty much all in English too. So I guess that's not really so good in terms of presenting in a different language. But
is everybody there a native English speaker?
No. The majority of members are either Spanish or from other parts of Europe or the world. So so being an English person in those environments, a native English person in those environments, is I stand alone most of the time. But we do get some from time to time, some Americans, Canadians as well. But the majority are native Spanish speakers. And you do have to make some corrections. There are things that don't translate well, and things that you have to be careful of. And I was talking about this on a podcast recently with a guy called Jason Reed, who you might have heard of. And we were talking about how you need to change things a little bit when you speak internationally. And you need to understand that some of your idiomatic language may not translate. And certainly a lot of humor doesn't translate. And English or British humor is quite specific, especially for my generation. There are things that I grew up with that a lot of people outside of the UK wouldn't get. A lot of Americans think it's all like Benny Hill and Are You Being Served? It's like, well, okay, that's there, but there's a lot of other stuff as well. But it is kind of a unique sense of humor in some ways, like the level of sort of sarcastic irony very. Brits often have very sardonic humor, and I love that, but it doesn't always work well in other environments, and can often come across as brash or rude. And a lot of English humor is also quite smutty, double entendre kind of stuff.
Yes.
And again,
dirty. Let's just say dirty. Yes.
And it doesn't work well, especially in public presentations. Even if you're doing stand-up comedy, that doesn't really translate well to an audience who aren't native English. So you do have to make adaptations. And then some people might see that as being almost an obstacle to being yourself, but you have to find new ways of expressing yourself. Or I see it as a challenge and really as an opportunity to discover some new ways of getting my message across that are more international, and that helps me be a better communicator.
I find often I actually sent a text to a friend in German, and it said in German that a project had landed in my lap. And then I thought about it an hour later, and I said, do they actually say that? I mean, she knew what I meant, but I said, I can't be part of this call. This project has landed in my lap. I have to spend the time working. And she said, well, no, there's a different way we would say it. So it was an unconscious idiom that I was using. I know that when I'm speaking to an international audience, even in America, where you have a lot of people who, people come here from all over the world. So in our modern business world, it's very international. I do use simpler words often. I will use simpler words. I will choose a phrase that I know will make sense, and I make an effort to slow down. Yeah. So I'm curious. I was curious about how that works for you.
Yeah, that's just true, actually. In my Toastmasters club, I get that feedback more often than anything else. Can you please slow down a bit? And that's not necessarily, I mean, I do have a tendency to talk fast, but even when I feel like I am slowing it down, for some people whose English isn't quite so good as others, it would be beneficial to go slower. I'm not going to go like super slow, but I am going to aim to slow it down for them. But yeah, you do have to consider that. And I like one thing I heard recently from a storyteller, Matthew Dix, about assume that someone in the room is always hard of hearing, wherever you are, because, like you said, always use a microphone. But I say, assume that as well for clarity of your speech as well. So be clear enough that just about anyone should be able to understand you.
It's basic diction, actually.
Yeah.
There's one of my favorite exercises. It's about telling our names. So, I mean, you're lucky you have consonants in the beginning and end of your name, John Ball. But say you were Safiya Ahmed, it's really easy to say Safiya Ahmed, and people don't know what your name is. So that's one of the exercises I often teach, is how to pronounce that sort of thing. John, what differences are you seeing? You do a lot of online work. How do you talk about the difference between presenting online and in person, especially since we're all online these days?
Yeah, it wasn't a pivot for me to move my business online because I've been doing it for such a long time. But I do remember when I first started running group coaching, and I've been working with Harv Eker, as quite a well-known guy in the US for the last 10 years or so, maybe a bit more really. But I remember working with Harv and his partner Michelle, and some of the feedback that they were listening to my calls and giving me feedback afterwards before we went live. And it was always turn the energy up. You have to be a bit higher than that. You have to be more engaging. And like, that's what they want from their presenters when they're on the stage. And I was going for that because I spent a lot of time in their training rooms. And no, they said even higher than that. And even then, you think it's being too much, but actually it's not. You do need to, especially on a coaching call, you need to be pretty high energy if people are going to get energized about what they're doing as well. You don't need to be off the charts and having people thinking, oh my goodness, this guy's scary. But you do need to be pretty up there when you're looking to motivate people, and probably more so than from a stage to some degree. Unless, of course, you're at a Tony Robbins event or something like that, which is different altogether.
Yes, well, Tony Robbins has been doing this for a very long time. So there's a lot you can learn from watching Tony Robbins or Harv Eker. That's true. That's true. Then now that people are mostly working online, what are you finding people need? What sorts of things, what are people asking you about our current situation? We're in the middle of a shutdown. We're right now as we're recording this, there are some places are opening up, but we're a long way from having a vaccine for COVID-19. So what are people asking you about now? What sorts of advice are you giving?
You know what? A lot of my clients are in the coaching industry and starting off as public speakers. I even have a few who are quite advanced as public speakers as well. And one of the things that they're concerned about is their income levels, because they're not able to book live events, so they're not able to have live coaching clients right now. If they're not online, they're having to make those moves to being online. And so one of the things that I get asked about a lot right now is about creating back-end products and services. And
talk about what define back-end for us, especially for our international listeners who haven't heard the phrase before.
Sure, yeah, that is an important part to clarify. So thank you. It's really the stuff that's not the front end. So it's not the first thing that people see. It's not necessarily your direct interactions with people. This is stuff that people can buy. If you had a book, that would be back end. It's stuff that you can buy before or after, but it's maybe not necessarily even lower end, but it's not necessarily direct access either. So this is the stuff that you would maybe have an online store for. These are additional services, things that you can offer as an extra on purchase, or that just stand alone by themselves as well. But they're making you money. You do the work up front, like you might create your information product or your book, and then you can just keep selling it and selling it. So you don't have to keep recording it, keep doing the work and trading your time for money. So it's really having more passive income structures. They don't start off passive for sure, but they become more passive once you've done the work.
Yeah, you do have to do the work to create it in the first time. And then you do have to do the work to keep marketing it, because everybody and his brother is out there selling something online nowadays. So it's all moved to online. So this is, one has to really keep it up.
These would, of course, be great things for people to have had before lockdowns and quarantines and everything. But if you haven't had them, now's as good a time as any. People are still buying these things, and they're going to serve you even well beyond this as well. It's like having a back end to your business of additional products and services that don't require you to exchange your time for money is going to be an earner for you ongoing. And so you'll have to do some marketing yourself, and there's work to be done to set these things up. I as much as I hate the word passive income, I only use it because people are familiar with it. But I don't really think, unless you just hand your money over to somebody to take care of something for you, it's not really passive income. You have to put in some work. You have to do some level of investigation. You have to do something, even if it's just the marketing, to actually make a sale. So residual might be a better word, but passive income is the one that everyone sort of lights up with. Yeah, I want that.
Yes, right. You know, making $1,000 in your sleep. While you were asleep, you have to build up to that. That's true. So, John Ball, this has been really fun to talk to you about this, and you and I could go on and on and on about the details of speaker training. Do you have one thought you could leave us with?
One thought I could leave with. I do believe, and maybe people are hearing this a lot right now, I do believe that even in difficult times, there are plenty of opportunities for the people who are willing to find them and work for them. So even though things might feel tough, the future seems uncertain, the people who are working as hard as they can now, or keeping their focus on opportunity rather than problem, are the people who are at least far more likely to come out better off in the long run.
I totally agree. Thank you. John, do you have anything you could leave us with, or ways that we can find out more information about you?
I love people to come and connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find me, John Ball, on LinkedIn. And I post a lot of stuff there. I'm getting more and more content up there now as well. It's my favorite social media site to be in, or professional media, really.
Thank you. We will have all that information in the show notes as well. John Ball, thank you so much for joining us on Speakers Who Get Results. This has been Elizabeth Bachman, and I want to remind you before we leave that you can go and check out your presentation skills at my free assessment That's at speakforresultsquiz.com. www.speakforresultsquiz.com. Takes about 3 minutes, and that's where you can see where you are rocking your presentation skills and where you might need a little bit of support. This has been Elizabeth Bachman. I'll see you on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.